The volume of dollars traded in investors and exporters window of the foreign exchange market rose sharply by 201.5% on a year-on-year basis to $14.53 billion in the first 4 months of this year. That is January to April 2022, from the $4.82 billion in the corresponding period of last year. An analysis of data on the monthly turnover from the FMDQ showed that $14.53 billion traded in the 4 months of this year comprises of $3.22 billion in January, $2.13 in February, $6.55 billion in March, and then $2.63 billion in the month of April. Now, the highest turnover of $6.55 billion in the month of March represents a 336.6% year-on-year increase when compared to what played out last year, looking at a $1.5 billion volume traded in March. Meanwhile, the Naira appreciated by about 16 kobo during the period, as the indicative exchange rate of the window also rose to 419 Naira to the US dollar on the 29th of last month from the 435 Naira to the US dollar it recorded as at the close of last year. However, the Naira also depreciated by 5 Naira in the parallel market. An analysis of data from black market traders also show that the indicative exchange rate rose to 585 Naira to the US dollar on the 29th of last month from 580 per dollar, which was recorded by December the 31st, 2021. Well, joining me now to discuss this and much more live in our Lagos studio, I have Mukhtar Mohammed, the Chief Executive Officer of Finance with Mukhtar. Thank you very much for joining us on the Breakfast Show this morning, Mr. Mukhtar.
Good morning, David. It's a pleasure always.
Now, we're seeing quite an interesting adjustment in terms of how we're seeing our currency play out. We're having the volume of dollars traded in the country record quite an impressive spike, looking at how much of a volume we saw in 2021 versus this year. Now, what do you think are some of the fundamentals playing out here?
Well, first and foremost, that shows that what the CBN is doing, they've been doing is we're beginning to see those results, though they may come in trickles. But we're seeing the result. The good could also be due with the policy of the CBN have introduced. You shouldn't forget the RX 200.
200, exactly.
So that is, I think that is playing out when you see those high exchange in terms of the dollar exchange to the Naira, because that's what CBN said it will be doing. And also that also could be an indication that most Nigerian in the diaspora, there's reduction in terms of the pandemic. I mean, most of them now going back to work and beginning to remit more of the money into the country also from there. And also, it could also be like the CBN 5 Naira policy for every dollar is also working. But I think even with that, the supply is still a little bit limited and it's still low comparable.
I would like to take you on that as well. Irrespective of how impressive these figures are on paper, the market sentiment still mimics some level of scarcity. You speak with players in the aviation industry, players in the manufacturing industry, they say their allocations are not just enough.
Definitely, they are not just enough. I mean, it has to do, what we're seeing here, we're not seeing this, we're only seeing the supply side. We're not seeing how much is the demand. How much are we demanding, how much demand, legitimate demand that CBN have been able to meet. Unfortunately, they've not been able to meet a lot of legitimate demands. And so that is a big challenge, like from the manufacturing sector, from the aviation sector. You could see that play out where some airlines were planning to start receiving tickets in dollars. And the federal government has not come out with any statement on that, whether they accept it or not. That is a pointer to the fact that they are not able to meet most of these demands. And if you also look at some companies that are involved in visa processing, most of them are now beginning to ask for money in dollars. So that doesn't happen. If you look at Ghana is beginning to say, look, all our exchange must come through the cities. So we have not gotten there yet.
So you think the nation's economy is still heavily dollarized at this point in time?
It's heavily dollarized because of our dependence on importation of a lot of goods, just because of the. And again, like you said, if you want to see how the market is recovering, you go to the parallel market, which is like the black market. Then that's where you know whether we are truly experiencing the recovery that we say we are, like you said in your report. From 580 to 585. Though as for last week, it has gone back to around 580 again from a high. Remember, it went to a high of 590.
Yes.
And we know why we will gradually see a parallel market price come down, because we are entering the election year, and a lot of the politicians will be exchanging the greenback for the naira.
Exactly. But in terms of how our currency is also performing now, that has also been one of the biggest bane of conversation. To what extent do you think this would also shape the next MPC meeting we're expecting by the 20th, something close to the end of this month?
David, MPC have not addressed the challenges. They seem to be dodging from this exchange volatility. They seem to more concentrate and say, oh, we want to bring down inflation, but they are forgetting to know that we are depending so much. This is the most drivers of inflation. And the CBN governors have not been able, the banking committee or the CBN have not been able to address this exchange rate volatility. Remember, they were very decisive some years ago when we had this problem when the dollar to the naira went as high as 50. We came the import-export window, and that crashed that price down to 360. At a point, the parallel market and the official banking rate were doing the same. But presently now, they are not doing that, and we are not expecting that to start anytime soon because the challenge still remains supply. There is no enough supply in the system, and there's so much demand. So as long as we are not able to get that supply into our system, even if we're supposed to be enjoying that now with the price of crude, but we are losing it in one hand because of the subsidy regime. So it's a major challenge, and I can say categorically, the CBN, the banking committee, have not been able to come up with a strategy to tame the free fall of the naira, just like they did some years ago.
Now, what would you also say is your own forecast? We've seen the performance of the naira appreciated within the first quarter of this year, looking at how much it is also traded from this 435 to around 416 on the within the regulated markets. But it's a different play out when we're looking at black market or the parallel market. That differential is still very much wide. And like you've also said, the CBN is still seemingly silent on this whole efforts towards unification.
They're very silent.
What do you think will play out in the second quarter? We're already in the month of May. We are close to
I can assure you that in the parallel market, we might see the naira exchange a little bit lower because of the political activity that we are going to see. And in terms of driving price to uniformity, in the import-export window, we'll continue to see the naira gaining because, like I said, the opening up of a lot of economy, a lot of remittance coming in, and we might begin. The time we'll see a stability in the import-export window is when we begin to attract those foreign portfolio investors and foreign direct investors. If that comes down, we'll see a crash. But I can assure you that we are moving towards that. But unification will be a high price to pay now, especially with the difference in terms of the parallel market and the government. And you must know that why we are seeing those differences in that space is that government, CBN, have not been able to provide a window for those that used to access the parallel market. They've not been able to provide that window for them to be able to access it through the official means, through bureaucracy. Until they do that, we'll continue to have these challenges.
Thank you so much for your time on the Breakfast Show this morning, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. We've been speaking with the Chief Executive Officer of Finance with Mukhtar. We'll definitely keep our fingers crossed and see what the CBN is going to do next in the next meeting.
Thank you.